What are the typical pawn structures in the ante-martial? Have you ever wondered how pawn structures shape the game in the ante-martial variation of the Ruy Lopez? Let's break it down in a way that makes it easy to understand. The ante-martial variation is a clever way for white to sidestep the well-trodden paths of the martial attack. This choice leads to specific pawn structures that dictate the strategies for both players. In this variation, white often sets up a solid pawn center with pawns on d4 and e4. This setup aims to control key central squares. On the other hand, black typically looks to challenge this center. Moves like pawn to d5 or d6 are common, depending on black's strategy. The pawn on e6 is a frequent sight for black, as it helps control important squares and supports potential pawn breaks. White has a few typical pawn moves in this setup. A common move is to play pawn to d3. This reinforces the center and avoids exchanges that could benefit black. Another frequent move is pawn to c3, which supports the d4 pawn and prepares for possible advances or knight development to c3. The pawn on a3 is also a thematic move in the ante-martial. It prevents black's pieces from occupying b4 and limits their counterplay on the queen side. Now, let's talk about black's pawn structure options. Black can choose between pushing d5 or playing d6. The d5 push is more ambitious and aims for central tension and piece activity. However, it can lead to isolated or backward pawns if not handled carefully. The d6 setup, on the other hand, is more solid and flexible. It supports the e5 square and allows for piece development without immediate central confrontation. In many lines of the ante-martial, early pawn exchanges on d5 happen. However, white often refrains from recapturing immediately. This helps maintain tension and keeps a slight spatial advantage. The resulting positions can resemble structures from the Italian game. Here, white's pawns on d3 and e4 provide a strong central foothold, while black's pawns on d6 and e6 create a solid but somewhat passive formation. The strategic implications of these pawn structures are quite interesting. The ante-martial tends to lead to slower, more maneuvering games compared to the sharper martial attack. White's pawns on c3 and d3 control central and queenside squares. Meanwhile, black's pawns on d6 and e6 maintain a compact formation that supports piece play rather than immediate central breakthroughs. In summary, the typical pawn structures in the ante-martial feature white's solid center with pawns on c3, d3, and e4, supported by a 3 to limit black's queenside activity. Black adopts flexible pawn placements on d6 or d5 and e6, focusing on piece development and control of central squares. These structures lead to rich positional play, steering clear of the sharp tactical battles found in the martial attack.